PGA Tour explodes. Phil Mickelson's inner circle leaks terrifying audio confrontation after club expulsion. This isn't clickbait. It is the most shocking audio leak in golf history. One of the sport's biggest legends just got exposed by his own people. The club said enough. Phil's inner circle said even more. And honestly, the pure, unadulterated hypocrisy makes my blood boil. Regular working people are struggling to afford a round at their local muni, yet these country club elites are leaking audio of each other like they're in a spy movie because one of them got their membership revoked. It is a disgusting display of entitlement, proving these guys care about nothing but their precious reputations and the privileges they think they're owed. But look past the surface outrage. Phil Mickelson isn't just a spoiled athlete throwing a tantrum. He is a master manipulator who just got caught on tape. His inner circle realized this audio is a brilliant trap designed to shift all the blame away from Phil's actual behavior and directly onto the club that finally had the guts to say no. Let me show you what's actually on that recording, who leaked it, and why this changes everything about how we see Phil Mickelson forever. That recording, a 26-minute phone call, reveals something Phil never wanted anyone to hear. Personally, I think this audio proves Phil has been hiding behind his legend for way too long. Do you agree, or do you think the club is the real villain? Tell me below. And if no one in golf media is telling you the real story, that's exactly what this channel is for. Subscribe and stay ahead of it. So now you know the headline. You know the audio leaked. You know Phil's inner circle turned on him. But before we get to that recording, before we play out what was actually said on that phone call, you need to understand the moment everything started to fall apart. It began at a private club in Southern California where Phil practiced, played with friends, and belonged. He had been a member there for years, one of the most famous faces in the game, walking those fairways like he owned them. Then came the spring of 2026. According to multiple sources, a club employee made an accusation against Phil. The club launched an investigation and confronted Phil Mickelson in the middle of a round. Right there on the course, club officials walked up and told him he needed to leave. He didn't finish that round. He didn't come back. The club released a statement. They were committed to a safe and respectful environment, and after a thorough investigation, they took decisive action. Phil Mickelson was no longer a member. Phil's team responded through his lawyer. The lawyer told reporters there was video evidence that would clear Phil's name. He said the accusations were based on misinformation, but when the media asked to see that video, the club confirmed there were no cameras in the area where the incident happened. No footage existed. The lawyer never produced any video. The claim just hung there, unproven. Now, getting kicked out of one club is embarrassing for any golfer. For a 6-time major winner, for a man who built his brand on being the people's champion, it was a disaster. But Phil wasn't done losing clubs. Word started spreading through the golf world that other clubs had also cut ties with him. The second club was another exclusive California destination in the desert. Phil had been a member there too. Then, suddenly, he wasn't. According to reports, the club's board made a quiet decision. No public statement. No dramatic confrontation, just a simple private notification. Phil's membership was no longer welcome. No explanation given publicly. Just silence. But silence in the world of private clubs is louder than any statement. Word gets around. Soon, the whispers started. Phil had been shown the door at a second club. Then a third. The third club was in the same area as the first, Rancho Santa Fe, close to Phil's own home. This was the most personal one, where his neighbors played, where his kids had grown up around the clubhouse, where he was supposed to be a local legend, not a cautionary tale. And yet, the same thing happened. No more Phil, no more privileges. 3 clubs, 3 different boards, 3 independent decisions. All of them came to the same conclusion. When reporters started asking questions, Phil's camp claimed Phil had chosen to leave voluntarily. He wasn't kicked out, they said. He simply decided to resign his memberships. 3 clubs, 3 resignations, all happening within weeks of each other. That was the story they wanted the public to believe. But ask yourself this. If you're Phil Mickelson, one of the most famous golfers in history, why would you voluntarily resign from 3 clubs in the span of a few months? Why would you walk away from the places where you practiced, where you socialized, where you belonged? It doesn't make sense, unless the alternative, being forced out, is even worse. According to journalist Shipnuck, who has covered golf for decades and wrote a book about Phil, the resignations weren't voluntary at all. The clubs had made their decision. Phil wasn't leaving. He was being shown out. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. Because the club expulsions, as embarrassing as they were, weren't the real story. The real story involved someone much closer to Phil, someone in his inner circle, someone who had access to his conversations, his secrets, and ultimately, his downfall. That person is Ashley Perez. Ashley is the wife, or former wife, of Pat Perez, a golfer who played on the PGA Tour and later joined LIV Golf like Phil. Pat and Phil were teammates. They traveled together. They played in the same events. They were part of the same LIV golf team, and for years, Ashley was part of that world too. She was at the tournaments, she was at the dinners, she was in the inner circle, but something happened between Phil and Ashley that changed everything. According to the investigation, it started back in 2015, the Barclays tournament. Phil had invited Pat and Ashley to his villa. It was supposed to be a friendly gathering, teammates hanging out. But at some point during that evening, Phil allegedly showed Ashley a nude photograph of himself. And then, according to reports, he suggested she could come to his bedroom after Pat fell asleep. Ashley was shocked. She felt violated, but she didn't say anything at the time. Over the years, she kept the secret. She stayed in the inner circle. She attended events. She smiled for photos. She pretended everything was normal. But she didn't forget. Then, in 2026, the club expulsions happened. Phil's reputation started crumbling. Ashley made a decision. She would no longer keep the secret. She reached out to Shipnuck. She told him her story. And then she did something that would change everything. She gave Shipnuck a recording. A 26-minute phone call between Phil and Pat Perez, a call where Phil apologized for what he had done. That recording is the audio leak. That is what the title is referring to. That is what this entire story is built around. Now let me tell you what's on that recording. It's a phone call. Phil calling Pat. And in that call, Phil is apologizing. He is admitting that something happened between him and Ashley. He is asking for forgiveness. He is trying to make things right. But here's the problem. According to those who have heard the recording, Phil's apology isn't genuine. It's calculated. He doesn't take full responsibility. He doesn't admit to everything. Instead, he uses lawyer-like language. He says he may have done something. He says he doesn't fully remember what happened. He tries to minimize it, to explain it away, to make it sound like a misunderstanding rather than misconduct. And that's exactly what makes the audio so devastating. It's not just an admission, it's a damning portrait of a man trying to manipulate his way out of his own behavior. But the recording does more than just expose Phil. It also exposes the inner circle itself. Because Pat Perez wasn't the only one on that call. There were others who knew, others who stayed silent, others who protected Phil for years. The investigation by Shipnuck identified 19 sources in total, 19 people who knew something about Phil's behavior and either stayed quiet or actively helped cover it up. That's the real scandal here. It's not just what Phil did, it's what everyone around him allowed to happen for years. Let me pause here and break down the key players for you, because this isn't just about Phil. This involves multiple people, each with their own role in this story. First, there's Phil Mickelson himself. He's the central figure, the one who built a legend over 3 decades and is now watching it crumble. What he did, he allegedly made inappropriate advances toward Ashley Perez, showed her a nude photo, and tried to cover it up. What it means, his legacy will never be the same. Second, there's Ashley Perez. She's the one who leaked the audio. She was allegedly the target of Phil's advances back in 2015, kept it secret for years, and then decided to come forward when the club expulsions happened. What she did, she recorded a 26-minute phone call where Phil apologized and gave that recording to investigators. What it means, she's the whistleblower, the one who finally exposed what had been hidden. Third, there's Pat Perez. He's caught in the middle. He was Phil's teammate and friend, but his wife was allegedly targeted by Phil. What he did, he received the apology call from Phil and allowed his wife to record it. What it means, he chose to expose the truth rather than protect his friend. Fourth, there's Shipnuck. He's the journalist who broke the story. He's covered golf for decades, wrote an unauthorized biography of Phil, and spent months investigating these allegations. What he did, interviewed 19 sources, listened to the audio, and published the investigation. What it means, he's the one who brought this to the public. And fifth, there are the 19 anonymous sources. They worked in golf, knew about Phil's behavior, and either protected him or looked the other way. What they did eventually spoke to Shipnuck, providing corroborating evidence. What it means, this wasn't just one person's accusation, it was a pattern. Now, let's go back to the audio. Because the audio isn't just a confession, it's also a tactical move by Phil. Here's why. When the club expulsions happened, Phil was in damage control mode. He had already been excluded from the PGA Tour's return program. They had made it clear he wasn't coming back. He had been dropped by some sponsors. His reputation was already damaged by the LIV golf defection and his gambling controversies. But this was different. This was personal. This was about his character, not just his choices. So Phil tried to control the narrative. He sent his lawyer out to claim video evidence would clear him. He tried to create doubt. He tried to make it seem like he was the victim of a conspiracy. But the audio proved otherwise. The audio showed that Phil knew what he had done. The audio showed that he was trying to apologize, but also trying to minimize it. The audio showed that the pattern of behavior was real, and once the audio was out, there was no going back. The golf world reacted with shock. Some players defended Phil publicly, others stayed silent, which in itself was telling, and some quietly expressed relief that the truth was finally coming out. The silence from Phil himself was also telling. After the audio leaked, Phil didn't do any interviews. He didn't hold a press conference. He didn't post a statement on social media. He just disappeared. He had already withdrawn from most tournaments in 2026, citing a family health matter. But now, his absence felt different. It felt like hiding. It felt like a man who knew he had been caught. And that brings us to the biggest question of all. What does this mean for Phil Mickelson's legacy? For years, Phil was one of the most beloved figures in golf. The people's champion. The guy who smiled at fans, the guy who signed autographs, the guy who was generous with his time and his money. But behind that image, there was a different story. Gambling debts, Saudi money, a man who was willing to burn bridges with the PGA Tour to get what he wanted. And now, this. Allegations of misconduct at 3 clubs, an audio recording where he apologizes for inappropriate behavior, an inner circle that turned on him and exposed the truth. Phil Mickelson is not the first sports star to fall from grace, but his fall feels different. It feels like the end of something. Like the legend was always a little bit of a lie. The question now is whether Phil can ever come back from this. Can he rebuild his reputation? Can he return to golf? Can he ever be the beloved figure he once was? The answer, for most people, is no. Once the public hears that audio, once they hear Phil's voice on that recording, trying to explain away his behavior, they won't unhear it. Once they know the details of what happened at those clubs, they won't forget. Phil Mickelson has won 6 major championships. He has earned hundreds of millions of dollars. He has been one of the most recognizable faces in sports for 3 decades. But none of that matters anymore. Because the story of Phil Mickelson is no longer about his golf game. It's about what happened off the course. It's about the people he hurt. It's about the secrets he kept. And the people who were closest to him, his inner circle, they're the ones who finally told the truth. So what happens next? Phil hasn't officially retired. Technically, he could still play golf. He could still compete in senior events. He could still be part of the game. But the game might not want him. The PGA Tour has already made it clear they don't want him back. The clubs have already made it clear they don't want him on their property. And now, the public has made it clear they're done with the lies. Phil Mickelson is 56 years old. He's at the end of his career. And this scandal might be the last thing anyone remembers about him. That's the tragedy of this whole story. Not that Phil got caught, but that he had so much and threw it all away. He had the adoration of millions. He had the respect of his peers. He had a legacy that would have lasted forever. And now, he has an audio recording that exposed everything. So here's my final thought on all of this. The PGA Tour Explodes part of the title isn't really about the tour itself exploding. It's about what this scandal represents for the entire sport. The culture of secrecy that allows powerful figures to behave badly and get away with it. The inner circle that protects people like Phil until they can't anymore. And it's about the fans, the people who loved Phil, who cheered for Phil, who defended Phil. finally learning the truth. The audio leak isn't just a scandal, it's a reckoning. The audio leak isn't just a scandal, it's a reckoning. It's the moment when the legend of Phil Mickelson stopped being a legend and became a cautionary tale. So was Phil the victim or the villain? In my opinion, the evidence points one way. Phil made choices. Phil behaved badly. Phil tried to cover it up. And when the truth came out, Phil's own people, the inner circle, were the ones who exposed him. That's not a victim. That's a man who finally got caught. And now, the whole world knows it. So tell me, do you think Phil is the victim here, or do you think he deserves everything that's happening to him? Drop it below, and if you want to know what happens next in this story, because trust me, it's not over, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming.